Hello, all, and welcome to this very exciting Civilizations in Review. I'm sitting here with Hanaro and Sabrina to talk about the Tlemcen Empire, not the university in South Carolina, although it sounds quite similar, but the ancient North African community. Thank you again, Hanaro, for writing it, and Sabrina for being my co-moderator tonight. It's going to be a really exciting and engaging conversation. As a reminder, you're watching us live on Facebook, so thank you for being here. We will also cross-post this onto our Spotify, onto our Instagram, onto our website, and onto our YouTube, so you can see this wonderful conversation, engage more, and even learn even more things about the Tlemcen Empire that we didn't get to. I'm going to throw it to Sabrina to read the 101 word intro, and we'll jump right in. But again, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Hanaro, for writing, and let's do this.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation and the Tlemcen Kingdom. So here we go. The Tlemcen Kingdom was historically centered on the city of Tlemcen in present-day Algeria. It was established after the dissolution of the Almohad Caliphate and was governed by the Zionids, a confederation of Amazigh tribes. Favored by its proximity to the port of Oran, the civilization became an important trading route which helped it flourish. Tlemcen's strategic position made it prone to foreign invaders. The kingdom suffered from constant conflicts with the Marinins to the west, Spanish kingdoms across the Mediterranean, and internal tribal warfare. This proved too difficult for the Zionids, who were eventually absorbed into the Ottoman Empire.
So many fascinating directions to start. What a powerful introduction. But let's start with my favorite question for every writer. What prompted you to choose the Tlemcen of all of the many empires we have on our list?
Yes. Hi, Sabrina and Hanbei. Thank you for organizing this episode. And that's a good question. I think I really want to write about Morocco, actually, any civilization in Morocco. That was my first to go, but I was actually drawn into Tlemcen because it's they're actually the enemies of Morocco, and it's a very unknown civilization. It's short-lived, only 300 years, but it's actually, I think, very relevant because it was the last civilization run by the Amazighs or Berbers in Northern Africa until the Ottomans arrived in 1554. So yeah, that tells you a lot about the legacy of the Amazighs in Algeria and North Africa overall.
It's very cool. I'd actually never heard of this kingdom before. And I was actually wondering, in your research, did you have any difficulty finding information or kind of just navigating through the research because of how not really common it is?
Yeah, so it was kind of challenging, but I think over the years of researching, I've got good sources. So I think I found most of them in Google Scholar and Academia EDU. So a lot of sources were in French and Spanish, actually. So kind of translating, getting the right pieces of the puzzle. But yeah, it was kind of difficult. And I believe that people should study it more. You know, we tend to focus on the Ottomans, on the Almohads, all these large empires, but all these, I guess, micro empires are not as researched as they should be in. And yeah, I mean, we should have more sources. So Civilizations 101, Al-Fusay, there you go.
I mean, you just said everything I was about to. I mean, that's exactly why we have all of these community empires, and that they hyperlink to each other so you can, bop around and have those conversations. Yeah, that's lovely, first and foremost, and I appreciate it. I've heard from many of the more unknown civilization writers that there's like one or two people that are the source, end of list. So thank you for being the third Tlemcen scholar, first and foremost. But also, that's exactly why we have these podcast calls, that we have all of those empires on our website, is to showcase the incredible and unique components that make up modern day Algeria, but also make up the region writ large. So you said everything I was going to. I just wanted to say more. I love it. I think this is fascinating. I think this is one of the most modern, quote unquote, empires we have. I mean, we have empires dating 4,000 years BCE. So the fact that this is 800 years ago, relatively recent in the time span. I'm curious, because it was more recent, even though it was segmented and smaller, if there were, you know, more like legacy components. I mean, obviously in your modern influence and key accomplishment sections are quite robust, but I'm just curious in your research. I mean, obviously Tlemcen is a modern city in Algeria today. So just sort of walk me through that sort of process in your research.
Yes, of course. Well, actually, Tlemcen was a result of the Almohad dissolution. Basically, the Almohads were such a big empire, you know, they're encompassing all of North Africa up until near Egypt, and they also control a lot of the Iberian Peninsula. And it was just too difficult for them to handle. It was just so much territory and a lot of revolts all over the empire. So it kind of went into a Balkanization kind of situation here. And three major empires basically spread out of this Almohads: the Marinids on Morocco on the west, and then on the center, which is present-day Algeria, it's Tlemcen, run by the Sayyanids, and then to the east, Libya and Tunisia were the Hafsids. So these were all the three different empires that were kind of coexisting in this area, but they were all enemies. They wanted to fight each other all the time and take over each other's territories, even though they were all Amazigh tribes and they were all coming from the same tribe. So from the same empire, I mean the Almohad. So that was pretty interesting. And, you know, it was just too difficult for Tlemcen to keep the empire afloat because they were right in the middle. The Marinids were attacking them all the time, trying to take over all this area. And well, Tlemcen also was not wise, and they decided to invade the Hafsids, and they were just kind of like a two battlefront, kind of like Poland of the North Africa region, if you might. So yeah, that ended up kind of being the demise of the empire.
Talking about rivals, I thought it was really interesting how they had a lot of rivals around them, but in your writing, you say that they sought alliances with the Emirate of Granada and the Crown of Castile. And so, I don't know, could you just expand a little on that? I thought it was very cool.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, I think when Tlemcenians were very into business, they were a business-minded empire. They managed to control an area of the northern Sahara called Sijil Massa. So this was a very important trading post where all the goods from sub-Saharan Africa arrived. So basically gold, timber, all these precious metals, they arrive into this city called Sijil Massa in Morocco. Tlemcen managed to conquer it, and they connected this into the route with Oran. So this is a port city in Algeria, and basically became the main trading partners of the Christian kingdoms in Spain. And that's why they started forming alliances with the Emirate of Granada and Castile, because they were also economic partners. So that was one of the reasons why they sought alliances with them. But at the end of the day, there were too many enemies for Tlemcen, and they just couldn't handle it.
Makes sense. It was very cool though.
Yes, stuck in the middle like that is very difficult and has been the demise of many empires that we have talked about. But I think that's impressive, partially, that they reached away from Northern Africa into this, you know, Spain and Mediterranean areas to build up a network. That's really crucial. I was curious, I guess, if you know, obviously that was trade oriented, I'm assuming, or please fill me in if I'm incorrect here, but probably also like military strategy as well. Is that correct? In combining with the Granada and Caliphate and whatnot?
Actually, I would say the Navy would be the ones they were kind of interacting with, but that was also one of the main reasons why Tlemcen couldn't survive, because they had a very weak military compared to their neighbors. Yeah, they were basically comprised of Arab nomads, basically mercenaries that were paid, hey, come and fight this war with us, come over, and kind of pay them. So they were not really loyal. And yes, I mean, you cannot fight your enemies if you don't have a proper army that can defend your borders, and, you know, a very centralized government. It was a very big empire. So yeah, unfortunately, they didn't have a very, very big military power.
Okay, so one more thing I thought was very, very cool. So the Zionid rulers invested heavily in the creation of mosques and madrasas like throughout the area. And would those still be here? Like, do they still exist from all like those hundreds of years ago? I mean, if you know.
Yes. Well, the main palace that they built was called El Meshwar. It's in Tlemcen. Unfortunately, the Ottomans arrived in 1554, and you know the story. They basically destroyed everything. They kind of rebuilt it later on, and then the French arrived, the colonizers, and also they actually were they were basically serving as the barracks for the French soldiers in Algeria. So you can imagine the destruction of the Tlemcenian legacy. Regarding the madrasas, Tlemcen was actually focused on building a lot of these mosques and madrasas in order to attract students and scholars from all over the Maghreb region, and kind of make Tlemcen a cultural, religious, and a scholar urban center for this whole Northern Africa region. But like I said, all these wars and all these conquests, not a lot of those architectural pieces remain, unfortunately. Very sad.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a rarity in a sense, that a lot of these empires, that is how we know about them, is the architectural marvel that remains whatever they have built. Which in a way kind of makes Tlemcen more impressive, that they didn't have a good military, they were surrounded by enemies, they don't really have much architecture left, and yet you wrote a whole article about them. So, I mean, props to the Tlemcen community for still getting their information out there. I'm curious if that's, you know, through writings that they may have had. I'm guessing the trading was a big part of it, but if, you know, how we know about them, the very little that we do, if there's a certain thing that you have focused on in your research.
For sure. Well, yes, architecture, they were not that big, but they actually had, I think, three main factors that helped them, you know, be recognized and be remembered, if you will. I think one of the main ones was the geographical expansion. So this empire comprised all the way from Libya to Morocco. So it's kind of like a pretty big territory. They managed to take control of it for at least 300 years. So they were in the map for sure. Additionally, they were able to create trading routes. So like I mentioned before, they connected the Sahara to the Mediterranean through trading routes. They were already, you know, hosting a lot of European merchants living in Tlemcen. They were kind of creating these depots where they could goods were exchanged. They were, you know, trading a lot of different commodities in this type of structures that they built. They were definitely a multicultural society. But I think one of the main factors why Tlemcen is remembered is the fact that they hosted a lot of Jewish refugees escaping from Spain during the Inquisition. So a lot of Sephardic Jews arrived in Tlemcen, and you know, the Muslim rulers were, you know, they allowed them to reside there while they were escaping all these horrible times in Spain. So that can tell you that Tlemcen was definitely a tolerant and multicultural society. So that's definitely something good to remember them.
I was definitely very shocked when I saw like how much of Jewish influence there was. You know, that's not something I would have thought of or connected, especially at the time, and like in that region. So I thought it was a very interesting point about this kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my favorite, I mean, I do interfaith Middle East work anyways in my real life, but when it comes to these empires, I definitely have a stronger interest when it comes to the interfaith dynamics, you know, whatever the different religious communities may be. And the fact that a Muslim community was close with a, you know, Christian Spanish like empire, emirate, whatever, and hosted many Jewish refugees leaving that community in all relative harmony in modern day Algeria, I think is a really wonderful story. If you have more background or interest on that, I would love to hear it.
Well, I think from the inception of the Tlemcen Empire, there are already so many different people living in this region. There were Arabs, there were Amazigh, there were Christians, there were Jews. So I think actually this society was pretty used to you know, interacting with all kinds of people, you know. One of the most interesting things that I discovered during this writing was that my hero, Ibn Batuta, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He's a Moroccan explorer that traveled for 40 years all the way from Tangiers, Morocco to China and came back and still managed to tell the story. That was his second stop during his trip at Tlemcen. Yeah, so you can tell he crossed the border. He was from the Marinid Empire and they were, okay, you can come in and visit Tlemcen and see all the beautiful city that we have. That was pretty cool. He actually only stayed 3 days in Tlemcen because he got a ride with some Hafsid merchants. And, you know, as being a good traveler, you got to take those chances. There was a very difficult trip to take across the Sahara. He needed good guides. So unfortunately, he was only there for 3 days, but it tells you that they were open to other people, the Tanzanians.
That is very cool. Did you find that out in your research or did you know before?
Well, I knew he had to go through there at some point. I didn't know that he exactly stopped in Tlemcen. I ended up reading about it while I was researching. It's like, okay, yeah, this is
very cool.
This was meant to be, yes.
Wow.
Even
cool.
Batuta.
I know he's not a Tlemcen hero, but he is your personal one. I mean, if you want to chat more about his travels and include the Tlemcen 3-day voyage, if you can, I think that's a really cool point to add, because I thought Ibn Battuta was much earlier than this part of history. So really wonderful to hear that he stopped in Tlemcen, part of its great legacy, clearly.
Yeah, he was a subject of the Marinid Empire at the time in the, I think, 1300s, and well, it was a not country but region next to the Marinid Empire, so it was the obvious next stop. Yeah, it was kind of interesting.
And he went to China?
Yes, Ibn Battuta traveled for 40 years. Well, he first did the Hajj in Saudi Arabia and everything, and then he decided to go all the way to China. I think he made it all the way to like the Hong Kong region for a little bit, then came back. He served as a consul in India, traveled all across South Asia, Eurasia. Yeah, he was a great traveler.
Very cool.
Lots of places, especially during that time of history. You know, there were no airplanes, no boats. You know, this was all done by foot. So he was an impressive traveler. Goals.
Very cool.
It began in Tlemcen. We love to hear it. That's really fascinating.
Yes.
Wow, that's a really great little anecdote. Thank you for sharing that. I'm super curious as well, as you sort of have mentioned a little bit, the sort of ruling system of the Tlemcen Empire. I mean, you mentioned that the Zionid, community, Amazigh tribe were the rulers, but do you have more information on the structure, the hierarchy, all of those components?
Yes, so Tlemcen was Islamic monarchy, and it was run by sultans. By the time of the inception of Tlemcen, Jack Murasan, he's the founder of Tlemcen. He actually was the governor of the Tlemcen region for the Almohads. So when he foresaw all these, balkanization of the Almohads, oh damn, it's getting fractured, this empire. I'm gonna declare independence and name this after my tribe, the Sayanids. So he basically all this dynasty, it's family or descendants of Jack Murasan, and yeah, Islamic monarchy. So basically, the Sultan it's the main leader, and yeah, basically a very open society as well. I mean, you could. A lot of people think Islamic monarchy. Oh wow, that must be like a caliphate. So everybody must be Muslim, but no, they were open to all sorts of people.
That's very, very interesting. And in terms of like economics, we talked a little bit about how, like it was significant and how they connected the Sahara with Spain and Europe. And I wanted to see if you wanted to touch more on that and like what they were trading and how that worked, especially in those times.
Yes, of course. The main trading partners were the kingdoms of Aragon and Castile in Spain. And these Iberian merchants actually, the way it worked is that they sent kind of representatives to live in Tlemcen. They set up these depots, and all peoples from all over Africa were in Tlemcen trading goods, you know. But the main exports of Tlemcen would be grains, irons, skins, dates, woods, and most importantly, gold, but also slaves, you know. It has to be said. And they were slave traders as well, the Tlemcenians. So yeah, that's the unfortunate part of their history, but it must be said. And yeah, that basically it's what helped them flourish, that they were very good traders and they were business minded people.
I did have one question. So in your writing, you say that this economics and this trading was regulated by treaties. And I don't know, when I think of the 1300s, I don't necessarily think of treaties, and maybe they definitely have a different kind of concept or a different look than normal treaties would have today. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of just touch up on that and what treaties entail or who kind of came up with these treaties.
Yeah, the ones that created these treaties were these representatives, the Iberian. There were also people from Genoa in Italy living in Tlemcen. So it was kind of like a tariff kind of a regulation, you know, I'm trading this good, you're trading this other one, and, you know, kind of like set up the tariffs and balances of what's to be traded. And yeah, it's definitely not like a treaty that we would see nowadays. It's a very, I would say, primitive kind of treaty, you know, because how would you communicate with your people up there in Aragon, for example? You know, you'll have to rely on your representative in Tlemcen to handle all these negotiations. So you could tell these people were very important back in Aragon or Castile because they were sent out to do all these negotiations with Tlemcen. So you could see the level of confidence they had for each other, for sure.
That's still very cool, very organized and very diplomatic. Yeah.
That's right.
Maybe it's a look at how modern trade treaties are created. And if not, I'm giving Tlemcen that wonderful designation. Very, very, very fascinating. I have one more question and we'll wrap up shortly, but about sort of their end of their decline. I mean, obviously a two-front battle from sort of all sides, a very, you know, resource-rich area of land, so wanted by a lot of people. And eventually the Ottomans in their conquest took them over. I was curious if there was like stages of that, or the Ottomans just sort of showed up and the Tlemcen was gone, if you know more pieces of their actual decline.
I think from the inception, this was already kind of like a failed empire. Mm-hmm. They were constantly being attacked by the Marinids and the Hafsids. At one point, actually, the Hafsids managed to take over the whole empire for, I think, like, what was it, 3 decades or something like that. And yeah, basically deposing the rulers and kind of exiling them. But Tlemcen fought back and reacquired the territory that they could. But it was already too debilitated, like I mentioned before. The military that they had was not very loyal. They also didn't have that many allies that could help them in land. All their allies were in the sea. So actually the Christian kingdoms took advantage of that. And I think Aragon was the one that took over the port of Oran near the end of the empire. And by the time the Ottomans were already expanding over here by Algiers, they sounded a pasha, one of those Turkish leaders, to take over what remained of the Sayanid dynasty. So the last son of the ruler of the sultans of Sayanid escaped to Oran and begged for help to the Spanish kingdoms, and he had to be baptized and converted to Christianity and change his name to Don Carlos. And that's how he lived the rest of his life. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, kind of shocking when I read it.
Yeah. Do you mind saying a bit more about that? I was not prepared for that ending.
Yes, no, it was kind of sad. And I mean, of course, how can we know if this actually happened? This happened so many years ago, but this is definitely very shocking when I read it on one of those journals on Google Scholar. Yeah, basically the Sultan was there, and I think he was killed. So the only remnant of the Saiyanids was this son of the Sultan. I think his name was Uthmar, and he escaped. He escaped Tlemcen, and he went up to Oran because he knew the Spaniards were there, and they were a little bit more friendly of the Ottomans. Otherwise, he would have faced death for sure. So instead, he decided to convert to Christianity and join the court of King Philip, I think. And yeah, he lived peacefully the rest of his years under Spanish government. Yes, it was just kind of crazy.
This is probably the most dramatic ending to a Civilizations in Review we have had. Wow. Thank you for telling the story. My goodness. And that fun little component is not currently on his article. So many more unique things to read about and learn and engage with. I will ask Genaro for you to write a dramatic, I don't know, article of this story. It's so fascinating, and I want it much more blown up on our website.
All right.
Yeah, I'll pass you that. And you can also do a whole Ibn Batuta, mapping his journey. I think you'd love that.
That'd be nice. Yes.
You probably already have done that anyways. Well, in our last little moment here, if there's any final Tlemcen things you'd like to share with us. But wow, thank you for such a dramatic, exciting, and interesting look into this empire. Thank you again.
No, it's my pleasure. Well, I think the main takeaway is that Al-Fusayk is doing a great job on researching all these little empires that are usually overlooked as opposed to the big ones, Ottomans, all these big empires in Iran. So I think it's important to focus on these little empires as well, because we can learn a lot from them. We learned that they're very diverse societies. They were doing treaties and trade with European kingdoms. They were cool with the Christians. They were cool with the Jewish. Lots of lessons to be learned from the Sayanid empire of Tlemcen for sure.
What a beautiful way to end it. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to this incredible Civilization in Review. Thank you again, Genaro, for writing this powerful article on this overlooked kingdom. And thank you for adding to the literature. Hopefully very many future people will learn all about the Tlemcen and their impact. Again, you can check us out at alfusaic.net. That's ALFUSAIC.net. Look forward to Genaro's upcoming biography of the last Zionid ruler. That's your title for now, at least working. And Ibn Batuta's interactive map journey, of course, starting his journey in Tlemcen. Thanks all so much for tuning in. See you at the next one.
Bye.